So, um, imagine standing in front of 20 adults. You just asked a totally simple question, and you get absolutely nothing back. Just deafening silence.
Oh, that is the worst feeling.
Right. Like if you're giving a normal presentation, you've basically just bombed. But in a language classroom, that silence means something else entirely, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It doesn't just mean they aren't engaging. It actually signifies a complete neurological shutdown from your audience. I mean, the stakes in that room are just incredibly high.
Because you're asking them to do so much at once.
Exactly. When you ask someone to operate outside their native language, you aren't just saying, hey, recall this information. You're asking them to fundamentally alter how they process reality in real time.
Which is exhausting.
It really is. And if they aren't fully, actively engaged in that process, the cognitive load is just too heavy. The brain quietly opts out.
Yeah, if you've ever tried to pick up a second language, you know exactly what that wall feels like. So today in this deep dive, we're exploring a curated collection of resources from a platform called ESL Info.
Which is super interesting to look through, by the way.
It is, on the surface. If you scroll through their site, it just looks like a standard repository for teachers. You know, worksheets, vocabulary lists, lesson plans.
Right, the usual stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But looking closely at the architecture of these materials, which are crafted by their editorial team, specifically an expert named A.H.M. Ohidu-Jaman, along with writers Sabin Akhtar and Emnan Nassim Fardos, it reveals something much deeper.
It really does. It reads less like a syllabus and more like, well, a psychological survival guide.
Yes, a blueprint for bypassing that cognitive resistance and literally manufacturing engagement in the classroom.
And their stated mission is to empower ESL teachers worldwide to deliver these dynamic lessons. But the underlying mechanics of how they actually achieve that are what's so fascinating.
Because they treat engagement like a science.
Yeah, they treat it not as a, personality trait of a super charismatic teacher, but as a highly specific, sequence-dependent neurological state.
Which brings us to the very first step in their sequence. The hardest part of the process, getting the brain to accept the transition into a new language in the first place.
The warm-up.
The warm-up. They place a massive emphasis on this. They have a core post titled, How to Use Warm-Up Activities to Engage Your ESL Class. But the one that really caught my eye is titled, 98 ESL Warm-Up Activities to Kickstart Your Lesson with Fun.
That is a staggering number of activities.
98. It's an absurdly high number of ways to start a class. But my question is, focusing an entire pedagogical strategy around this concept of fun seems almost counterintuitive, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, you're dealing with adults trying to master complex syntax. If they're just playing games, aren't they wasting valuable time that they could be spending actually learning the mechanics of the language?
I get why you'd think that. But fun in this context is actually a highly tactical psychological tool. Linguists often talk about this thing called the affective filter.
The affective filter.
Yeah. Right. When a learner feels anxious or self-conscious or stressed, the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, basically hijacks the cognitive resources needed for language acquisition.
So you just freeze up.
Exactly. The filter goes up and absolutely no new information can get through. So those 98 activities aren't about mindless entertainment. They're designed to forcibly lower that affective filter.
Oh, wow. So the humor or the lighthearted competition in a warm-up activity, it sort of acts as a neurological Trojan horse.
That's a great way to put it.
You get the students laughing, their threat perception drops, and then the pathways required for absorbing vocabulary just suddenly open up. It's almost like stretching before a heavy workout.
Yes, exactly. You don't just sprint onto the track. You have to warm up the muscles first. And that ties directly into their use of the word kickstart.
Because the native language is deeply entrenched.
Deeply. Transitioning to a second language is a massive cognitive lift. But a successful warm-up secretly activates the specific vocabulary networks needed for the main lesson.
So the students think they're just playing, like, a quick association game.
Right, but their brains are actually pulling the target language to the forefront of their working memory. By the time the actual instruction begins, the cognitive engine is already running.
Okay, but a relaxed, warmed-up student isn't automatically a fluent one. Lowering their defenses is just step one.
Right, you still have to teach them.
Exactly. Once that guard is down, how do you ensure the activity actually transitions into learning? Because I imagine a 40-year-old corporate executive doesn't want to chat about the same topics as a high school sophomore, you know?
Oh, absolutely not. And that brings us to the segmentation of their resources, which is just incredibly deliberate on ESL info.
Context really is everything here.
It is. They don't just offer generic speaking prompts for everyone. The platform aggressively separates its materials by demographic and immediate utility.
Yeah, I noticed that. You see specific posts like 20 best ESL speaking activities for adults, starkly contrasted with 23 best ESL speaking activities for teens.
And they drill down even further into immediate professional survival with something like 50 common business expressions for workplace conversations.
Which makes sense on the surface, but let me push back for a second. Are we overcomplicating it? Isn't the mechanics of the English language, the verbs, the sentence structures, exactly the same for all those groups?
The mechanics are the same, yes, but the vehicle delivering those mechanics completely changes based on age. And the vehicle dictates the engagement.
Oh, I see. It's the difference between teaching someone how to navigate high school drama versus teaching them how to negotiate a corporate merger.
Exactly. A teenager is in this stage of intense social identity formation. They will fiercely engage in a structured debate about pop culture because it mirrors their internal developmental priorities.
But if you try that with a room of adults,
If you walk into a room of exhausted adult professionals and ask them to debate a controversial topic, they will often just freeze.
because adults have such a deeply solidified self-image,
Precisely. For a professional, making a basic, stumbling grammatical mistake in front of their peers, it feels like a direct threat to their perceived competence.
the ego is incredibly fragile when you strip away its native vocabulary.
That is the core pedagogical tension right there. To engage an adult, the practical activity has to provide a psychological mask.
Meaning what, exactly?
That's why adult resources lean so heavily on role play, simulating a tense client meeting or a salary negotiation. If they make a mistake in a role play, well, it's the character making the mistake, not them.
Oh, that's brilliant. It lowers the personal stakes.
And furthermore, the adult learner is driven by immediate, pragmatic return on investment. If an adult is learning those 50 common business expressions, they're doing it because they have a conference call on Thursday and they literally need to survive it.
Right. The engagement is entirely driven by utility, which raises an interesting problem, I think. Well, speaking activities and role plays are fantastic for generating conversation. But eventually, the scaffolding has to be built. You have to teach the underlying code, the technical building blocks like vocabulary and grammar.
You definitely do.
So how do you pivot a class from a highly engaging, low-stakes role play into learning abstract grammatical rules without triggering that cognitive shutdown all over again?
Well, the secret is you don't pivot away from the role play. You hide the grammar inside of it.
You hide it.
Yeah. The traditional method of teaching language separates the rule from the reality. A textbook will just dedicate a dry chapter to, like, the mechanics of the present continuous.
Which puts everyone to sleep.
Instantly.
Whoa.
But the ESL Info platform completely inverts that approach. They ground the abstract concepts into hyper-practical, everyday reality.
You can see that just from the titles of their lesson plans. They aren't framing their materials around syntactical concepts at all.
Right. What are some of the titles you saw?
Things like grocery shopping lesson plan, or talking about daily routine ESL conversations, and teaching asking for an appointment in English. They even have a list of the 100 most common expressions in English for everyday conversation.
The paradox of language learning is that the most mundane, seemingly boring tasks are actually the most cognitively engaging for a beginner.
Really? The mundane stuff.
Think about it. If a learner cannot confidently navigate a grocery store or ask a doctor for an appointment, they experience a persistent, low-level anxiety in their daily life.
Oh, right. It's survival language.
Exactly. Tackling those everyday scenarios triggers the brain's immediate reward centers because you are giving them the tools to decrease their daily friction.
But doesn't anchoring every lesson in something as mundane as grocery shopping limit their vocabulary potential? Or is that everyday stuff the ultimate anchor for engagement?
It's the ultimate anchor. Let's look at one of their specific posts. Teaching adverbs of frequency, 17 best ESL activities. In an academic vacuum, an adverb of frequency words, like always, sometimes, rarely, never, it's a dry, abstract concept. Memorizing the rules of where to place sometimes in a sentence is tedious.
It's like sneaking vegetables into a fruit smoothie.
Aha, yes.
The students are learning adverbs of frequency, but they just think they're explaining their morning coffee routine.
It's like handing someone a technical manual on internal combustion when all they want to do is drive to the store. What this platform does is just hand them the steering wheel.
So by pairing the grammar concept with those 17 practical activities, the learner isn't studying grammar for a test. They're using the rule as a physical tool to articulate their actual life.
And when grammar is presented as the solution to a communication problem the student currently has, the resistance vanishes. They engage because they desperately need the words to tell you about their day.
That makes total sense. Now, we spent a lot of time analyzing how these materials manipulate the student's cognitive load to manufacture engagement. What about the person at the front of the room?
The teacher.
Yeah. The resources on ESL Info dedicate a massive amount of real estate to the teacher's mindset. They make this overarching promise to help teachers teach with confidence and ease.
Which is crucial because true classroom engagement is directly tied to the teacher's presence.
Right. If all this psychological trickery relies on the teacher executing these lesson plans, what happens when the teacher themselves is stressed out?
The whole thing falls apart. The psychological state of the room is entirely downstream from the psychological state of the teacher. We talked about the affective filter of the student. Well, teachers have an affective filter too.
Of course they do.
Humans are incredibly adept at reading microexpressions and body language. If a teacher is underprepared, silently panicking about how to fill the next 15 minutes, the students sense that instability immediately.
Their own anxiety spikes in response.
Exactly, and the learning environment shatters.
But ESL Info offers a specific remedy for that panic, don't they? They offer a free ebook titled Teaching ESL Speaking, 30 ESL Lesson Plans, which is specifically tailored for low-intermediate learners.
And the value proposition there is very direct.
Yeah, it claims that because everything in these 30 lessons is pre-planned, the teacher can stay completely stress-free. They just easily achieve their learning outcomes.
It is all about removing the teacher's cognitive load. Teaching is an act of intense, sustained performance.
That's exhausting.
It is. If the teacher is forced to invent activities on the fly, manage the pacing, and simultaneously monitor 20 different students' grammatical accuracy, their working memory is entirely depleted.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here. If every single transition is mapped out and every worksheet is pre-printed from this ebook, doesn't the teacher risk losing the spontaneity required to engage a real room full of people?
I know it feels contradictory, but structure is actually the prerequisite for spontaneity.
What do you mean?
Think of a chef having all their ingredients chopped and prepped their mise en place before the dinner rush hits. The prep is what allows them to focus on the art of cooking.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So the pre-planned lesson is the prep work.
Exactly. Or think of a jazz musician. A jazz pianist can only improvise a brilliant solo because they have a profound internalized mastery of the underlying chord progressions. The structure doesn't limit them. It gives them a safe framework to explore.
So when a teacher has those 30 lesson plans securely in their back pocket, they aren't panicked about the structure of the next 30 minutes.
Right. That freed up cognitive bandwidth can now be redirected entirely toward the students. If a learner asks a fascinating, unexpected question, the stress-free teacher has the psychological safety to abandon the script for 5 minutes.
They can explore that tangent and then seamlessly guide the room back to the core lesson.
Precisely. And the platform explicitly connects this structural safety to the concept of the teacher voice.
Yeah, I saw that post. How to improve your teacher voice as an ESL teacher.
The idea is that once the lesson is handled by the pre-planned materials, the teacher can actually focus on their tone, their pacing, their physical presence in the room.
Because you can't project warmth or authoritative calm if your internal monologue is just screaming about what activity comes next.
You really can't. And that teacher voice is the ultimate instrument for capturing a room's attention. It regulates the nervous systems of the students.
A calm, confident voice signals that the environment is safe.
Which brings us full circle, right? The safe environment keeps the students' affective filters lowered. The whole ecosystem is entirely cyclical.
The resources support the teacher's confidence. The teacher's confidence lowers the student's anxiety, and the lowered anxiety allows the student to actually engage with the material.
You nailed it. It strips away the mystery of the naturally gifted teacher and replaces it with replicable neurological strategies.
So increasing classroom engagement isn't magic. When you look at the entirety of the ESL info strategy, it's a practical formula.
A very practical formula.
You kickstart the brain with targeted fun. You tailor the activities to specific age groups to protect the ego. You hide complex grammar inside everyday survival scenarios. And you equip the teacher with pre-planned confidence to use their voice effectively.
If you control the environment, you control the engagement. It's as simple as that.
But looking at this perfectly optimized, meticulously structured approach, it leaves me with an interesting philosophical question.
Oh, what's that?
We've established that the 98 warm-ups, the 30 pre-planned lessons, all these tailored tools are incredibly effective at guiding a student toward fluency. But language isn't just a transfer of data, right?
No, not at all.
It's an inherently messy, chaotic attempt to just understand another human being. So if our pedagogical tools become so flawlessly pre-planned that they eliminate all friction in the classroom, what happens to the uniquely human element of making spontaneous mistakes together?
That's a deep question.
Right. How much of our true ability to communicate is forged by the perfect lesson plan versus the unplanned moments that happen when the lesson plan completely fails, the structure collapses, and everyone in the room just has to laugh and figure it out together? Something for you to think about.